Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. With how good Subtlety rogues have become in the patch 915 for Mythic Plus content, I decided it might be a good idea to do a refresher guide for Subtlety with all the new updated information in case you want to dive into the spec. It's a very fun playstyle with a ridiculously easy to play AoE rotation, but a little bit of complexity when it comes to cooldowns, and I thought I might be able to give you guys some of those pointers if you're looking to pick up rogues right now. Honestly, I'm expecting rogues to do really well in 9.2. Taking a look at the tier sets we're getting for the next patch, which could change in the future. If those tier sets stay right now, rogues are looking incredible going forward. So if you're looking to get into your rogues and are particularly aiming for Mythic Pluses, hopefully this guide will cover everything you need to know. But right before that, most of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed, and the more I ask you, the more of you subscribe, so let's keep it going. Subscribe if you're watching this video anyway, especially if you want to see more guides on the channel. We got the Mage Charmer coming up very soon, and then afterwards 9.2, and if you want to stay up to the most up-to-date guides for the content, then be sure to be subscribed. The Subtlety playstyle is a mixture of maintaining buffs, maintaining debuffs, and keeping certain abilities on cooldown as much as possible, and making judgment calls when it's a good idea to hold those cooldowns like before a boss fight or hold them before a big trash bag that you have to clear out. Those cooldowns are going to be Vanish, Shadow Blades, as well as Symbols of Death. Symbols of Death is probably the most important cooldown because it's up every 30 seconds, and the more you use this inside of dungeons, the more damage you can do. Though Symbols of Death should never be used by itself. Keep it on cooldown, but always line up 2 Shadow Dances inside of a dance window. Shadow Dance has a lot more cooldown reduction, so it has flexibility. Shadow Dance increases the damage your rogue does, but also gives you access to stealth-based abilities, primarily Shadow Strike, which will be a good component of single target damage output. Outside of cooldowns, you also have some maintenance. You want to maintain Slice and Dice for an auto attack buff at all times, as well as Rupture on as many targets as possible because it's a potent bleed, and your Mastery does scale with finishers, which Rupture is a finisher that's a bleed. You'll be building calm points with abilities like Backstab, Shuriken Storm, which will generate a calm point for every enemy hit, or abilities like Shadow Strike, which can only be used inside of Stealth or during Shadow Dance. The rest of this video will really dive into the actual dungeon portion, how to build your character, some of the best conduits, and what your rotation will look like. But a lot of players find a basic overview of the thought process behind the playstyle helpful, so hopefully it'll help you guys out when learning this complicated spec. Before you dive into a dungeon, you want to make sure you're prepared, so let's start with the talents. In the level 15 row, Weapon Master is the best choice for single target. Technically, you could play pre-med if you're newer at Rogue, as Shadow Strikes from the Stealth are just going to give you a free Slice and Dice, which means less having to maintain all these buffs and debuffs. In level 25 row, the best choice is Shadow Focus. The cut on the energy cost for abilities makes for a smoother rotation and overall more damage. Level 30 Deeper Strat also the best choice, but also it lets you catch more calm points because in your AoE scenario, you're going to generate a lot of them. Being able to spend more calm points wisely means more overall value output. Level 35 row is survivability row, and nothing beats cheat death, which literally lets you die, but not literally die, just cheat death at once. Makes it much easier to stay tanky. Level 40 row, literally pick whatever you like. The slow with Night Terrors can be fine. Shot in Dark can be good if you need to cheap shot, but for the most part, it doesn't really affect you too much in Mythic Pluses. At level 45, Envelop and Shadows also just the best choice for all kinds of content. I really wish Dark Shadow was good at some point. Last row, level 50 tier, Shuriken Tornado is the best choice for Mythic Pluses, though if you're newer at Rogue or don't like Shuriken Tornado, you should play Master of Shadows. Shuriken Tornado is fantastic for the damage, but it does have an upfront heavy energy cost, so if you're not really used to the Rogue energy regeneration, this ability will be a little bit of a learning curve to get behind. When it comes to picking your covenant, there's obviously a good choice, but if you want to just mess around and try the different covenants and play something you like, something you simply just have interested in, then you should definitely do so. I find it's much easier for me to learn new specs and new classes when I'm playing the playstyle or a legendary that I just find more interesting. So if you're new to the rogue, start off with whatever covenant you want to, but in this video we will cover the soul binds that you will want to run no matter the covenant you want to play. As a Venthyr rogue, which is the better covenant right now for Subtlety Mythic Pluses, you will be running Theater Soulbind, together with Deeper Daggers, Stiletto Staccato, and the final potency conduit of Lashing Scars. As a Necrolord Subtlety, you will run Earmere Soulbind, and you'll run Deeper Daggers as well as Stiletto Staccato, and you'll go down the middle of the tree to pick up the extra critical strike bonus. As a Kyrian, Pelagos seems to be doing the best, and for that one you'll run triple potency with planned execution as your third potency conduit. And as a Night Fae you'll run Korain Soulbind with deeper daggers, Stiletto Staccato, and you'll pick up a trait down the middle of Korain for extra critical strike. As a Venthyr rogue, you'll want to run Obedience Legendary to shorten the cooldown of Flagellation and also give you a stacking versatility buff, which is just more damage, but it also synergizes into your other cooldowns far easier. If you play anything that isn't Venthyr, play Finality. This gives you plenty of single target damage as well as good AoE damage that doesn't necessarily play with your Covenant, but it is probably the best damage choice if you're playing anything that isn't Venthyr. When it comes to gearing your rogue, your best secondary stats besides agility are going to be critical strike and versatility. Agility is still the best stat that you can get for your rogue to increase damage from all kinds of sources, so agility is still your best choice, especially when it comes to upgrading gear. Though stats like haste on secondaries should mostly be avoided as subtlety doesn't get the biggest benefits from that stat. In a single target scenario, your main comp point builder outside of dances will be backstab. You'll be using it to chip away at the enemy, committing the comp points to generate into slice and dice and rupture. Make sure neither of those two falls off. If you build comp points and you have slice and dice and rupture already on the target, you can spend the rest of the comp points into eviscerate. Then there's dance windows, which is where you'll do more damage but your rotation changes slightly. During dance windows you don't really want to refresh slice and dice or rupture, but if either of them are falling off, you should, though you kind of want to set those abilities rolling, the debuffs and buffs, before you enter dance window. In a dance window you press Shadow Dance, Symbols of Death, followed by 2 Shadow Strikes into an eviscerate, and you do those 2 Shadow Strikes and eviscerate combo 3 times in a row. Then after the first dance you'll go into the second dance with the same thing, and that's more or less the rotation you should always use every single time. If certain abilities are off cooldown like your Covenant abilities, press them as soon as you can. With the Venthyr ability, make sure to press it right as you're about to spend column points because that's kind of how the ability works. With Shadow Blades, try to keep it on cooldown throughout a single target fight as often as possible. In a 3+ target scenario, you'll be switching up column point builders a little bit. Instead of backstabbing, you'll be using Shuriken Storm, which will generate a column point per target that it hits. You will still be maintaining Slice, but now you'll want to put Rupture on all 3 enemies. And whenever you do dance windows, instead of Shadow Striking, you will at 3 targets will use Shuriken Storm. And instead of using Eviscerate, however, for damage, you will use Black Powder, which is like an AoE version of Eviscerate. At 5 targets or more, your rotation is going to be mostly AoE. Majority of your column point building will be from Shuriken Storm, so you'll maintain Shuriken Storm, Slice and Dice, but no more Ruptures. At 5+ targets, forget about Rupture, you'll just spend the rest of the column points into Black Powder. Inside of your dance windows, the rotation doesn't change. You'll still Shuriken Storm, and you'll still use Black Powder. In big trash groups, you can actually swap out. Instead of using Black Powder for AoE damage, you can substitute it with Eviscerate, which will mean more single target damage to whichever is your primary target. While your overall damage will suffer for the dungeon, your damage for the focus of that target will increase. And Subtlety Rogue is fantastic for it. Sometimes your Necrotic Wake and the Necromancer needs to go down as soon as possible because he's the most important mob. Everything else doesn't matter. Everything else is just pad damage. So you building those column points and focusing Eviscerates into the largest enemy in the group or the scariest enemy in the group that needs to go down first, Subtlety is fantastic for it. You will take a hit for your overall damage for that dungeon, but you will make the dungeon easier because that enemy is no longer a threat. Next, a note about Shuriken Tornado, the talent on the last row for our rogue. This ability should be used on cooldown, whether you are doing AoE damage or pure single target boss damage. You will have to prepare before you use this ability because when you first press it, there's a bit of a delay before your rogue starts firing off Shuriken Storms left and right. Just know that when it's going off on its own, be ready to use a finisher to spend those calm points into. Now, this ability should be used if it's up against a boss or against a singular enemy. You kind of want to just keep it on cooldown. It may feel awkward and weird because of the 60 energy cost up front, and it won't generate as many calm points against a boss, but it still is better and should be used because it is a damage gain. It might be a good idea to let your energy pool or accumulate without spending it and using it once you're at almost full energy, so your rotation might be a bit smoother and you won't feel as starved. Another cooldown we should mention is Shadow Blades. Shadow Blades is a 3-minute cooldown, though that can be deceiving because of the conduit staccato. As we auto attack enemies and get procs for energy and combo points, we also reduce the cooldown of Shadow Blades by a considerable amount. So while normally this ability is a 3-minute cooldown, which should be saved for just the most dangerous bosses or the toughest trash mobs, you can actually use Shadow Blades a lot more often throughout a dungeon. The basic idea is, throughout the full dungeon, you want to spam Shadow Blades as much as you can, though it may be difficult sometimes to gauge whether you should save it for the boss or save it before the next trash pack, or just send it as early as possible just so you can have more Shadow Blades uses. As a new rogue, just try to send Shadow Blades on cooldown as often as possible. The more uses of Shadow Dance you'll get in a dungeon, the more damage you'll do generally. There's always going to be a bit of variance with how you use Shadow Blades. Really depends on how your tank is going to pull the dungeon. Some tanks pull big, some tanks pull slow, and you'll be able to use Shadow Blades at different intervals depending on the kind of group you have. So it will be a little varied, but just try to use this ability as often as you can. The cooldown is much shorter than it really is. Finally, one last thing, Subtlety feels amazing in pure single target. Once you get the rotation down and you get comfortable with it, and as long as you're trying to sync 2 dance windows inside of a Symbols of Death while not having to refresh Slice or Rupture, once you figure out the flow to it, it feels amazing in single target. The AoE damage is ridiculously easy, and the damage it puts up right now in 915 is awesome. Where the Spec can feel a little bit weird is in 2-target, 3-target cleave. Putting Ruptures on everything and just maintaining dots on enemies like some Warlock or something will feel awkward. Just wanted to let you guys know, if you do feel weird about it, yes it is. If you can ask your tank to pull slightly more enemies to that 5-target and higher cap, it'll feel a lot smoother as an overall experience. And that's going to be everything I have for you guys. With 9.2 coming out, hopefully sometime in the near future, with all the different tier sets, I'm definitely going to be making some updated guides for rogues. And with the Mage Tower, I'm going to have so much fun putting guides for rogues going forward. So if you guys enjoyed this guide, let me know in the comments below, or even just give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more guides in the future, definitely hit subscribe as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything in particular, or if you have any tips of your own that you learned from playing Subtlety Rogue in Mythic Plus Keys. Especially if you end up playing off-meta covenants like non-Venthyr, if you prefer Kyrian, Night Fae, or Necrolord. What are some of the different things you do in order to maximize your damage that a newer player might find useful? Let me know all that in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.